In the last example that we showed that the populations were different. So the satisfaction surveys proved to us that the companies were serving different coffee and that they were not all similar, there was no overlap. So only when there is no difference, only when there is a difference in populations can we compare them. Our last example using the ANOVA test simply told us that the population were different. They didn't tell us how they are different. So now we can, for section A here, we can compare Tom Honey's to Jack Donald's. Using a 5% significance level, let's conclude if there's a difference in the satisfaction rates. We're going to use our formula. We're going to use the following formula, sorry. So here we're setting up our intervals. So we'll have the difference between our mean of the first sample and mean of the second sample, and we can set up our range with this. So I'll go through each individual variable as we enter them in. So I will be referring to the last question. So here we have Tom Honey and Jack Donald's. So our mean, if you recall from the last question, Tom Honey had a mean of 84.25, and that can be our first mean variable. Less Jack Donald's had a mean of 67.67. Plus minus our t. Now to determine our t, we need to review our t-chart. First we need to determine our degrees of freedom. So in this example, our degrees of freedom equals n minus k. And so that would bring us to 21 minus 4. So n being our total amount of observations and k being our total treatments or groups. So we have a degree of freedom of 17. Now we've set this at the 5% significance level, and with our range we can go either above or below it. So we have a two-tail. We're going to be using the two tails within the t-table. Now we have a significance level of 5%, so two tails, and 17 degrees of freedom. So we'll take this 2.110. Now we're going to take our MSE, or our mean squared amount, and we have remember our mean squared, so we had our MST and our MSE. This is asking for our MSEs, which is 77.77. And the total amount of observations from Tom Honey's, which was 4, so 1 over 4, plus the total amount of observations from Jack Donald's, which was 6. So 1 over 6. And we can work this out. We have 16.58 plus minus and we get 16.58 plus minus 1201. So we've set our interval here, our confidence interval at 5%, and that would give us a range of 4.57 to 28.59. Now, what we were looking for is if 0 were to fall within this range. The reason we're looking for 0 is because then there would be overlap between the populations. So if there was 0 in this range, statistically, we can't say that there for sure is no difference in the populations, meaning it could have been chance that the satisfaction rates, they may have been using the same type of coffee or similar type of coffee. But because 0 is not in this range, that means we can say with confidence that there are different populations, so we can assume that 2 different types of coffees were used for the customers to provide those satisfaction rates the way they did. Now looking at our last question, we see that Tom Honey's had an average satisfaction of 84.25 and Jack Donald's had 67.67. Without 0 falling within this confidence range, we can say comfortably that Tom Honey's has a better coffee than Jack Donald's. And it's not just a chance population not just chance satisfaction results that just happen to give those. So let's look at Tom Honey's in third mug. So here we can see that the range would be from negative 8.5 or so all the way to 15.5 or so. So 0 does fall within this range. That means we can't, in statistics, we can conclude that the coffee is not different. We can't say that for sure coffee is the same. But what we can say is that we don't have the evidence to prove that the coffee is different. because 0 does fall within this range between Tom Honey's and Third Mug. When we have a look at their mean satisfaction, as you see, Tom Honey's is slightly ahead at 84.25. Third Mug is at 80.83. But this difference could be, we're not saying it is, but it could be based on chance of just the satisfaction results in our samples, and not true indicator of the coffee. So if we were to do this sample again and survey another group of customers, we may get Third Mug with a higher satisfaction rate. Whereas we can conclude that between Tom Honey's and Jack Donald's, that wouldn't be the case.